You've probably seen or heard of the movie 365 Days, in which the girl had 365 days to fall in love with the boy. What if we tell you something very similar has also happened with our gods? In this video, we'll tell you the story of Hades and Persephone, as their circumstances were fairly comparable. We know you're eager to learn their complete story, so let's directly get into it. The firstborn child of Kronos and Rhea, Hades was the sibling of Zeus, Poseidon, Demeter, Hera, and Hestia. Following the overthrowing of Cronus by his sons, their empire was divided, and Hades was chosen by lot to rule the underworld. Hades was portrayed as being cruel, heartless, and unaffected by sacrifice or supplication, like death itself. He did a good job of settling into his role. He lived in his realm and rarely went outside. Instead, he spent the majority of his time inside the spheres that the rivers Acheron, Styx, Cocytus, Phlegethon, and Lethe had defined. Though he rarely interacted with people, he was close to those that lived in the underworld. Even though Hades was much feared, most ancient Greeks were unaware of his more charitable nature. He protected the rights of the deceased while concentrating solely on his territory. Zeus, the king of the gods, formerly had a relationship with Demeter, the goddess of the harvest. They conceived a beautiful goddess named Persephone, who was adored by everyone for her light-hearted benevolence. Out of strong maternal protectiveness, Demeter kept her daughter ignorant of the ways of the world, and dressed her like a child even though she was fully grown and had become a lady. She hoped to always keep her virginal, innocent, and close to her mother. On a fine day, Hades asked his brother Zeus to give him one of his daughters in order to fulfill his longing for a wife. Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, was offered to him by the god. He agreed to the girl's forced abduction, despite knowing the goddess would object to the marriage. So one day, when Persephone was alone in the fields, the ground suddenly split out, revealing a huge chariot drawn by dark horses. Before the young girl could even scream, Hades reached over the edge and grabbed her up. None of Persephone's companions witnessed the kidnapping since it all happened so quickly. The appearance, the kidnapping, and the departure. She cried out to them and begged for her mother, but no one responded to her cries. The god drove the jet-black horses into the pit as the earth parted in front of Hades' chariot. The hole closed up behind Hades and Persephone as they descended into the depths. Demeter arrived shortly to pick up her daughter, but she was unable to find Persephone. Distraught and desperate, Demeter searched high and low for her daughter, without once pausing to eat, drink, take a bath, or rest. She searched for 9 full days and nights in the most remote regions of the planet. Demeter was furious. She destroyed lands, crops, and livestock as she bewailed the loss of her daughter. If she didn't find Persephone, she vowed to make the planet barren forever and wipe off all people. The goddess Hecate finally informed Demeter that Persephone had been abducted on the 10th day, but she was unsure by whom. The two goddesses visited Helios, the sun god, who was witness to all that occurred on Earth. In addition to informing her of what occurred, Helios also made an effort to convince Demeter that Hades, who is Zeus's brother and the ruler of a third of the universe, was not an unsuitable partner for Persephone. In the underworld, Persephone was upset. She yearned for her mother and the surface world despite Hades' generosity and gifts to her. Hades was sad, yet also patient. Unlike the other gods, he gave Persephone equal power to rule alongside him and positioned her throne right next to his. Instead of seeing her as a piece of property, he saw her as a potential companion. Persephone requested Hades to build a new realm so that the greatest mortal souls may enter it. It was referred to as Elysium, the underworld's heaven. Persephone experienced conflict. Even though she missed her mother, Hades was the only one who had ever treated her like an adult. She was starting to develop feelings for him. One morning, when Persephone entered the garden of the underworld, the gardener offered her a pomegranate. Persephone had previously refused to eat anything, because if she consumed any food from the underworld, she would be permanently chained to it. But that morning, Persephone ate 6 of the pomegranate seeds, because she was that hungry. Then the messenger of the gods, Hermes, suddenly appeared in front of her. He explained to her that Demeter was responsible for the earth's freezing and the absence of any agricultural growth. The only thing that could stop mortals from starving and dying in great numbers was Persephone's return. Persephone reluctantly agreed to let Hermes bring her to Mount Olympus, where Zeus and Demeter were having a disagreement. After all, Zeus had sent his daughter to Hades without getting her permission. Demeter warned Persephone to get back home right away, or else she would let every living thing on earth to starve to death. Demeter needed to hear from Persephone that everything was fine, and that Hades had been kind to her. As Hades approached from the shadows, the gods turned abruptly, and the throne room went dark. He held a partially consumed pomegranate in his hand. Persephone has eaten the fruit of the underworld, Hades remarked coolly. She must return and rule it with me. Zeus pondered Persephone in silence. while Demeter started throwing another fit. "How many seeds did you eat, daughter?" he asked. Persephone told him, 6. Zeus stood there from his throne, and the assembly quieted. "Since Persephone has eaten 6 seeds of the pomegranate, I rule that she will spend 6 months of each year in the underworld with her husband, and 6 months tending to the mortal's field with her mother." After agreeing to the deal, Demeter restored Earth's fertility and returned to Olympus with Persephone. According to Greek mythology, Demeter departs from Mount Olympus to lament Persephone's absence at her temple in Eleusis, and used to cry while soil grew colder and less fertile when Persephone left for the underworld, and it remained that way until her appearance several months later. Since Persephone was kidnapped, spring and summer have made way for autumn and winter, and the cycle of the seasons had been accompanied by an increase in the fertility of the ground. In the autumn, seeds were buried underground, just like Persephone. However, Persephone and the crops of the earth returned to the sun in the spring. The Greeks gave this explanation for the changing seasons of the earth and how a goddess of life fell in love with the underworld. The love story between Hades and Persephone is one of the most famous love tales ever recorded. Their story, which is also referred to as the rape of Persephone or the abduction of Persephone, is a love story, although a not entirely happy one. Just like us, even the gods have a complicated love life, right? Persephone demonstrated how she could stand up to her mother out of love. So let us know in the comment section what you would have done if you had been in her shoes, and whose love story you believe was more romantic, Hades and Persephone, or Massimo and Laura.